Hey everybody, what up? Scuffy here. And I'm gonna do a little something, little focus today on the World Cup, the Horus Heresy Legion's World Cup that is taking place. Currently, we are right now in the group rounds. So we've got about four, I believe, four groups of various teams that are all playing round robin against each other. And then at the end of that round, after everybody's played, which I believe is about 4 to 6 weeks, then the top X of each of those groups, I believe it's the top two teams, it might be the top three, I could be wrong, will go on to the top cut and actually begin to play in the bracket rounds. So that's where we currently are. So what I wanted to do was to kind of take a look at the Warlord selection, the team selection, basically, at this point in time. Not going into player rankings or anything like that, because that's probably way beyond my scope, but just looking at what warlords have been selected. So I want to talk a little bit about that, because initially I think I put up, somebody had mentioned something about a lot of Alpha Legion out there, and just got me thinking, like, yeah, I should probably take a look and see comparatively what's the dominant selection. Now it should be noted that these choices here, these choices were made following the recent changes to the to Thiel, to the Ultramarines, as well as a couple of the tweaks that they made to the initiative for Horus and Fulgrim. However, these selections were made before Apotheosis was officially the victor. At this point in time, I think it was like you weren't sure which one was going to go which way, and then Apotheosis was added to the game a couple days later, following Warlord selection. So Apotheosis didn't necessarily lack of a word here, influence the Warlord selection. However, the changes to the Warlords and some of the tweaks that they just recently did. So let's take a look at it. Let's get into let's just get into the Warlord selection here. Let's go into collection. So actually, right out the gate, I'll say I looked at it. Every faction here is represented in the game. I was kind of curious to see what factions, if there was going to be any factions that were left out that were not included in the game, but that's not the case. Every faction was represented, some to a much greater extent than others. So first, Warlord selection. Let's look at your top three Warlords. So your top three Warlords actually coming in here. I didn't tally up the total number of players. I probably should really quick just do that. 28, 39, 49, 59, 67, 77, 83, 89, 93, 97, 106, 108, 110, 112, 114, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29... 133 players, it looks like, because divided by 3, that sounds about right. 133 players. Boom. Wow. That's some quick math. I might be off by 1 or 2. 15 Magnus. Magnus is the #1 selected Warlord. This should not be a massive surprise, given the fact that Magnus has been very consistent. He plays very well. He's got a forgiving window, and he's been a top 3 Warlord now for several months. So 15 Magnus. Now, following up #2, might be a little bit of a surprise to you, was Conrad Kurz. Conrad Kurz comes in at 13. 13 people have selected to play Conrad Kurz as their Warlords. Now, keep in mind here, again, going back into the way the teams are formatted, there's 3 players per team. Each player has to have 2 Warlords. And of those 6 Warlords, they cannot be on the same faction, so they can't overlap. You can have neutrals. You can have an Imperial and a Chaos. That's a little different because there's a wider pool there. But you can't have, within your six Warlords that your team is representing, you can't have 2,000 Suns. So if you're going to have a 1,000 Sun Warlord, Magnus ends up being the primary pick there with 15. Kurz ends up being the primary candidate for the Night Lords with 13. By the same token, so I mean, so therefore, if you're going to get a Warlord selection for a faction, generally, there are some exceptions, as we'll go into here later date. Generally, it's going to be one Warlord selected more than others. So the third most popular pick is actually coming out of the Orphans of War is Branthan, Ulrich Branthan. And I think some of this is following the hot release of the Orphans of War. When I say hot, I mean they're generally well received. You know, obviously this is following the changes to Tarsa, because otherwise I believe Tarsa might very well be in these shoes instead of Branthan. But Branthan's late game options and his ability to heal throughout the course of a game, and then late game being able to just respond to any large threats and destroy troops outright, is very well possibly why he's so popular. Not to mention he's a Primarch. We'll get into some of the representative stars, how many Primarchs versus non-Primarchs, or when I say not really a Primarch, I understand that, but legendary Warlord versus non-legendary Warlord, we can take a look at that. Coming in at number 4 is actually a two-way tie. There's a two-way tie here against Horus. Horus with 10 players playing Horus, and also 10 players playing Thiel. And obviously, if you were to talk to people right now, maybe you would think that Thiel is a bigger pool, is a bigger representative. I think Horus and Thiel right now are really top contenders in the top decks that are going on ladder right now, because they really counter each other and compete with each other. I wouldn't say directly counter, but I mean in terms of speed and get it done, they both stand an even chance against each other. It just depends on which way you want to go and how hard and fast you can hit. So interesting that both of these are 10 players apiece, tying for fourth under Kurz and Magnus, under Magnus and Kurz respectively, as well as Branthan. So coming in at 5th, under 10 to 9, is actually Alfarius with the Alpha Legion. So surprising to folks, maybe not. Maybe it is surprising to you, but not as popular as the big guys. And this is following changes made to the Alpha Legion and changes to the Orphan, the One of Many. However, this is at the same time, this is also following changes that were made to traps. So there are several other Alpha Legion Warlords that were selected here, and maybe people were shying away from Alfarius and going into trap mode. I myself am representing Alfarius in this round, just because I'm familiar with him. I'm comfortable with his playstyle. I enjoy his playstyle, number one. Number two, I think he's of the Warlords that our team had, I mean the remaining options, he's a solid option. He's not bad. We've got several of the other big guys are represented by the other players on my team. So what I'm picking up is something that I'm more comfortable with, but also at the same time I feel has a good game potential against a variety of matchups. And there are some Warlords that I don't think were selected for the simple fact that they're, hang on here, I'm getting back to collection, that they don't, in ladder or in random games, they might fare very well, but if you're playing in a tournament mode where everybody knows who you're playing, that can really shine up your match, and they can really, I mean, they can side deck counter for it. Kurz has a forgiving late game. He really does. If he can get to that late game, especially now with Apotheosis, he can really last a long time. However, if you're playing a Kurz, you are most likely going to include as much anti-stealth as you possibly can, or have your deck designed to kill him before he gets to that late game. That's just what you're going to do, but you know who your opponent is. Some matchups, you have a better chance of doing that. Alpha Legion, you're not really sure. You're not really sure how they're going to play or which way they're going to go, and it could be frustrating for you, but at the same token, you know that if you're a little bit more aggro, you can hit them, and as an Alpha Legion player, you know that if you can get to a certain point or you've got the right draw, you have a better chance of controlling the pace of the game. And that's personally why I chose Alfarius, is I like to know what my tools are. I like to make proper use of my tools, and I think that if you can do that and you can play that style, he's very forgiving. I won't discount the same for Magnus, for Kurz, for Horus, and for Thiel. I think they all have those similarities. Branthan, to some extent, I'm not as familiar. I played with him a little bit, but I'm not as familiar and comfortable in that round. But I do think that that's one reason why they're so popular. Now, going into popularity for the next two, tied at 7. So this is 2 less than Alfarius. It's got a 2-way tie between Aristide Nassau of the Custodes, who also has a great play style in terms of being, if you can get your draws off and build your setup right, you can duck and weave and avoid some lethal stuff for quite some time, so it's very forgiving. And then also Canis Vertex. Canis Vertex finally shows up in terms of representation. 7 players have chosen to play Canis Vertex. Now, Canis has seen several changes, several nerfs, adjustments, cards that have enhanced other factions and making them stronger against Titan arms or Titan weapons. So maybe that's some lack of popularity there. But again, a long-term playstyle, if you're very familiar and you feel comfortable playing Canis, you can do well. And I think that's okay. And then we start to get into a little bit dippers, but still strong representation and strong warlords. Saul Tarvitz has got 6 players playing Saul Tarvitz in this round of the group division of the World Cup. 6 players playing Saul Tarvitz. Saul Tarvitz I've gone on about for the last 2 months. You can take a look at all the highlights, the deck breakdown, and that was before supply lines, which I'll be honest, it's okay, it's good, but it's not necessary for Saul to have an effective game. You can build with it, you can choose not to. He can have several different builds now, which is nice, but he's a solid player, warlord that if you know what your deck is and you get your draws right, you can do well. And then tying him is Lehman Russ of the Space Wolves with 6 players as well. Again, this is one that I'm playing with, I feel comfortable with, and at the same time, I really felt that the ward concept in the course of tournament mode can be very crucial, and so far it has. So, not gonna lie, I'm surprised that only 6 people are playing Lehman Russ, but at the same time, given the other choices and selections, it makes a lot of sense. And obviously, this is following the changes made to Greybeard. I believe otherwise we would probably see a lot more Bolvi Greybeards in the game, in the tournament mode, but he is completely unrepresented at this point in time. Lehman Russ is there with 6. Fulgrim comes in at 4. 4 players choosing to play Fulgrim of the Emperor's Children. This is following his change to his initiatives, as well as the change to his whispers. 4 players are also choosing to play Angron, so this is the first World Eaters action, which is surprising given the fact that how the World Eaters, Angron is very popular. People would say it's branded, it's a simple deck. He's very aggressive, but he has dropped in terms of effectiveness through the course of changes and new cards added. More importantly, if you're going up against an Angron and you're not an Angron deck yourself, you really have a better way of designing your deck at that point. He's one of those warlords that I really think, okay, pack as much anti-stun or frontline as possible. So the course of a tournament, while he can get off and get a lot of damage, he's also got some drawbacks to him. So that could reduce his selection. And then we're starting to get into just kind of the dwindles here. So we'll go with the number of warlords who have 3 people playing them: Exodus, Numian, and Perturabo. Exodus has got 3 people. Again, I think there's people looking into who are already comfortable playing Exodus. He was decently popular. If you didn't have Alfarius, you could play Exodus just the same. Not the same deck necessarily, but have the same effect. Numian, who I think is a very solid warlord, does suffer a little bit with Canis, does suffer a little bit with the Orphans of War cards, as well as a Rule of Fear could really just wipe his board. So I think if you've got a good player who plays Numian, they can do very well with them. But there could be some of that reason why he was not selected as much. Also, I think some people just don't know or don't really truly appreciate the power of Numian. I props to those 3 who are playing him. Good luck. Perturabo with the 3. Again, there's another Primarch who's a little bit, I won't say underrated, but very, very specific in how he operates with a low initiative. I think that might be one factor why he's down. Perturabo direct damage decks can deal quite a bit of damage. But how they respond, I don't know. I'm actually surprised, though, that there's not at least one or two more. Just given the fact that if people not knowing how many Canis were going to be selected, but just being able to pack those and just straight out destroy a Titan Arm. I'm really kind of curious to see if any of those matchups take place, any of those pairings with where a Perturabo player faces a Canis player and just wrecks them terribly. And then we get into the twos. So these I'm just going to rattle off the folks who are playing with twos. Lorgar, Santar, Ferrus Manus, and Mandragorax. We've got two players playing each of those warlords. And then the single warlords. And these are warlords that have just been selected singly. We've got Tarsa, does have a representation. He's in there. Caliber Hall, Ingo Peck, Erlin, Rask, Decima, Thale, Har, Sevatar, Korax, Argletal, Weirdmake, Rom, Gulliman, Vulcan, Karn, Lucretia, Phocis Takar. Props to that. And then Custodes, Amon Telmacarian, or Tauramachian. We'll say a Tauramachian. So very interesting here, really just taking a quick look at the bottom here. Two factions represented by one warlord, Rask and Korax. Now, Korax is definitely one of those warlords that in tournaments, long-term mets, really suffers. He's got a great ability in a game. He plays very well. If you build your deck, you can build your deck a couple different ways. But ultimately, in the same way that you can side deck in for Kurz, it's much more brutal and efficient to do it against Korax because you can just have as much anti-stealth, kill his troops, take him out of his hide mode. And now, even though they've changed his whispers where he can go into stealth, that's a one-time thing. And if you can break him at that point in time and kill him before he can get off his sentence, he's got an uphill battle. He's not a bad selection, but I do think that's somewhat reason why he was only selected one time. And to be fair, the Raven Guard themselves, Sherokin is not bad. Sherokin is probably performs better than Six and Nev in that regard. So I'm surprised there aren't people playing him a little bit more. But the other two are just they're at the point really where they're not going to hold out well against the other options that are currently in the field. So talking faction representation here, the number one faction that's represented here with 16 warlords is Thousand Sons. 93% of those were Magnus. That's 15 of the 16 were Magnus. Night Lords coming in second again with 14 selected, and that's 92.85% of those are Kurz. Again, that's 13 Kurz and 1 Sevatar. Orphans of War come up third, however, tying, it's a three-way tie with the Alpha Legion, who also have 13, and the neutrals. Now, neutrals, I debated breaking it up between Mechanicum, Imperial, and Chaos. I just lumped them all in because ultimately there's nothing specific for them. So the neutrals are also in there. So we've got 13 neutrals, 13 Alpha Legion, 13 Orphans of War. And what's interesting here is to look at the percentage of warlord representation in each of those. So of the Alpha Legion, 69.23% of those are Alfarius. So more than half, but not a huge amount compared to the Orphans of War, which is 84.61% of those are Branthan. And then the neutrals, just over the majority, with 53.84% is Canis. The rest of that is comprised of all the other various neutral warlords. So that's kind of interesting to see. Ultramarines have follow up in here with 11, 10 of those being Thiel, so that's 90.90%. And then the Emperor's Children have 10, surprisingly. That they actually edge out some of these other warlords that have quite significant amount. 60% of those are Saul, 40% of those are Fulgrim. Sons of Horus follows up with 10 as well. They tie with the Emperor's Children. However, 100% of those Sons of Horus warlords is Horus Lupercal himself. So that is a sole representation, and he's along with Korax, Rask for the Death Guard, and Perturabo are the ones who are 100% representing their faction in the World Cup. Now, the Custodes, we had 8 Custodes. Warlords chosen, 87.50% of them were Nassau. And then Space Wolves coming in with 7, 85.71% of those were chosen as Russ. The World Eaters, 66.66%, which is very ominous if you ask me, were Angron, which shouldn't be too surprising. That's 4 out of 6 were Angron. We've got 6 players playing. Salamanders, 4 Salamanders selected. We had 1 Vulcan, 3 Numian, so 75% of those are Numian. Word Bears has an even split. Now, granted, there's only 4 people who've elected to play Word Bears, and depending on how you look at it, there's an Argyltal and there's a Rom. And there's 2 Lorgars. So is it 50% Lorgar, 50% Argyltal? Or is it 50% Lorgar, 25% to Argyltal, 25% Rom? I elect to go the other way. I think Argyltal and Rom, while using the same face card initially, are different. So, and I got to be honest with you, I expected a little bit more Lorgar. He is not to be overlooked. I've been playing him for a few weeks now, just for fun, between him and Argyltal and other things. I just have a really fun time with Argyltal, or not with, well, but with both really, but with Lorgar. So I'm surprised that there's not more, but at the same time, I can understand as a newer faction, for players who may not have all the cards for him, or may not even have Lorgar himself. If you're lacking a couple epics or a legendary, you're not going to feel too comfortable selecting him, and that's very possible why the Word Bears were only having 4 choices, whereas the Ultramarines and the Orphans of War have quite a few selected. And I don't think, I mean, the Orphans of War don't need many of their legendaries. They do need their epics, but those epics have been in the shop. And the same reason the Ultramarines, they can go with a couple of their legendaries. They don't need them for Theo. Theo has a variety of ways to play. So I do think that factors in some. I also think some people just haven't hit the stride or understand exactly how the Word Bears fully work, but they're very good when you want them to be. Iron Hands, 50% of those were Ferris. And then, like I said, we talked about the Iron Warriors, 100% of those were Perturabo. And then we go into 1 Warlord for the Death Guard, 1 Warlord for the Raven Guard. So that's a lot. That is a mouthful. And that's the breakdown. I wish I had some more visuals to actually get in there and kind of show it off. I don't. I'm just going by cards here, by collection. Again, every faction from Sons of Horus all the way down to Chaos has been represented. There was a Lucretia, there was a Caliber Hall, and a Decima. There are definitely Warlords who were not selected. I could probably do another list of those and count how many did not have a single person playing them. But I don't think that's necessary. This isn't the meta report from Everguild at the end of the month. This is just the World Cup, the group rounds, the group pairings. What'd I call it? I gave it a title. Breakdown of the group division round. Dramatic pause. I believe once this round is all done and we go into top cut. All right, can't even say top cut. We go into the bracket round. Bracket pairings. I believe there will be a option or a chance for folks to change their Warlord selections at that time. And when that does take place, or even if it doesn't, I'll be doing another breakdown to see what we end up with for the players, for the teams that are still playing, and what they've selected to, and kind of compare it and see what changes. Are we going to see some of these guys that got picked drop off because either their players lost and it didn't make it to the next round, or because tweaks in the game happened? It just kind of need to see how things evolve. So I wanted to share that with everybody. I wanted to break it down. I wanted to take a look at it. I've got some other stuff I'm going to try to get done with my edit. I did the warp chatter with LCFR and Agrash. There were some audio issues. That's entirely my fault. There was some background sound that I did not think was going to factor in, and for the most part it didn't until we got into trying to have more of a conversation with Agrash, who was dialing in from France. So it was a third line, and there are parts where it's very hard to hear him. And I'm trying to figure out if I can do subtitles, like type my own subtitles. I don't know if I will or I won't, or I'm going to have to trim. I don't know. It's a little complicated, but that's all my doing. That's all my fault. And I make apologies for that now. And I'll probably reiterate that when I branch it out. But other than that, the solo discussion I had with Agrash came out fine with LCFR. We were talking word bearers. So I've hyped up the word bearers. I've talked at length about them myself. They're not a bad faction. I am not a fan of the word bearers. I am not a chaos guy. I'm not a traitor. I love the loyalists. But I really do enjoy and appreciate how that faction plays. And I think they're not underwhelming and they're not overwhelming. And I really just have enjoyed them. And we have some good discussion. We're talking about some cards and there's some games played there as well to kind of highlight some things. And yeah, so hopefully when I get that up here within the next day or two, check it out. We've got 72 hours left before the December decklist competition ends. So if you have not already looked at that, please take a look at the rules. The theme is infiltration. Compile yourself a deck list that meets the theme in your eyes and tells a story of infiltration, and then send it to me. Either PM it on the Discord, or if you're on Reddit, you can message me on Reddit as well. The card list I'll take a look at. Currently I've got 11 submissions. So yeah, so take a look at the rules. First place gets you an epic of your choice. Second and third get a rare of your choice. So if you are missing some of those cards for the Word Bearers or the Orphans of War, the Ultramarines, or you would like to get yourself a copy of Apotheosis, because that's an epic. I'm not mad about Apotheosis, by the way. I love it. I've only played it a couple times with Rom, but I love it. I do think we'll probably see the health go down to like heal 8 instead of heal 10 and still get the +1/+0. There'll be some change with it down the road, but it's a solid card. It's a solid card. I love it. It's fun. But if you want an Apotheosis, then do yourself a favor and submit yourself a deck list that matches infiltrations. If you can win first place, you never know. And that's it for me, guys. I'm going to take a look, getting into this event here. I'll tell you what. Take a quick look here at the prizes. This Underworld War, the art is okay. I like the Loyalist option better. I think these are both good. I don't know if you'd want to give too many more tools to a Kurz, because you could very well end up with a all tactics Kurz, very similar to how we have an all tactics Angron. And when I say all tactics, I mean that he would have several troops, but they would be very clutch troops. They would not be a bunch of filler. I don't know. Although I do know that having a cheap, easy to use, quick option to jank your opponent's tactics when you know that they are going to play a tactic. If you're at 9 energy, or your opponent's going to be at 9 energy, and you play that and you raise their Apotheosis to cost 11, guess what? You still have also 7 more energy to play with on your turn, and you've affected their turn, and that's your counter. That's easy. I like that option more, is what I'm saying. So I'm going to go with that. I think I've talked about all I need to talk about. I've got some little replay stuff. Got some clips from the warp. Clips lost to the warp. I'm going to do a year-end wrap-up probably next week before the New Year's, just to kind of touch base on, just like I did last year, like a year in review. I've got some plans to change a few things for 2020 for myself. I love doing the Chewbacca Believe It's, but I'll be honest with you, I think we're at a point currently where you can do that over and over again. We know the guy makes wonderful, fun things. Like, unless it's like a really super fun, super duper Jubok pull, I I don't know. I might stop doing those. I'm still going to try to do a greatest top deck moments because those are just fun when they happen, if they happen naturally. Um, and then, my whole philosophy with ladder is going to change next year. I'm going to do something different with Warlord Focus and looking into a different intro. Just season wise, new year, want to try some new stuff. So this is just all me thinking out loud. So don't be surprised if in a month there's things that look a little different. I'm doing things a little bit differently. I'm still going to be recording the same. I'm still going to be talking about the game, as a breakdown, and not just trying to show replays of here's the deck I'm playing. I'm going to do that too, but I really want to, continue to encourage to teach concepts, thoughts, get people thinking outside of the 30 cards. What does these 30 cards mean? Why were these 30 cards selected? How important are these 30 cards? And then how do you go from there? What do you build? Like, why do we do things? Why do we pick a Thiel? What makes Thiel so great? It's not Thiel. It's not Thiel. Just saying. It's like people complaining about, Thousand Suns. Oh, Thousand Suns are terrible. Magnus is terrible. But really what it is it's the psychic energy. That's the issue. Let's focus on what the actual issue is, and let's work to address it. Oh, Kurz is terrible. He's horrible with Apotheosis. Well, then maybe the issue is Apotheosis. Or maybe it's Night Haunter, because Kurz himself, if he can't get to Whispers, he's not the end all. I'm just saying, just be a little bit more specific. Just be a little bit more specific to the problem. And I don't like overabundant, grandiose statements. I might speak in hyperbole sometimes, but I really don't like it when it comes from like a basis of complaints that really end up not being valid. That's just me. That's my small mini rant for today. So with that being said, we've broken down the World Cup. If you've got any questions about the World Cup, feel free to leave it in the comments below. I'm going to continue posting up rounds. I think me and my opponent we've got some extra time with the holidays, so I don't think we're going to get our games in today, so it'll probably be next weekend when we'll get our next round in. We just finished up against Finland, Denmark. I showed my games against Alex 87. Alex Asterix 87, boy! Trader's End? What? That's stupid, but I did it. And then this next time around, we're playing against Singapore, Indonesia, I believe. Yes, Singapore and Indonesia, and I'm not sure if that's if that's an even split or if they're just all from one. It might just be Indonesia at this point. But that's where my opponent is currently. So we actually have an 11-hour time difference. So it does make things a little bit more harder in terms of linking up, but we will get together. We'll play. I'll put those games up, hopefully before the end of next week. And if not, if I don't get anything else up, which I will, so I don't know why I'm saying that, but have a Merry Christmas. Take a look at yourself and ask yourself, have you been naughty? Have you been nice? If you've been naughty, then, be nicer. And if you've been nice, good for you. That's it. I don't have any other words for wisdom. All right, guys. Until next time, keep playing Legions, and we will talk to you later. Bye.
And now it's time for great moments in top decking history.